I used to believe Evan and I were unbreakable. 10 years of marriage, one company built from absolutely nothing, Winslow Wellness. He was the charming face of our brand, the one who smiled for investors and shook hands at conferences. I was the architect behind every single innovation, every product line, every strategy that made us successful. We made promises under city lights on our 5th anniversary, swearing we'd never let success come between us. No matter how big we get, Evan had whispered that night, "It's always you and me first." I believed him completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd built everything together from our tiny apartment, working until 3 in the morning, surviving on pizza and dreams. But people don't change overnight like flipping a switch. They erode slowly, like water wearing down stone. Late-night phone calls he took in another room. Investor meetings that mysteriously stretched past midnight. Empty glances across the dinner table where conversation used to flow easily. The silence between us became so thick I could barely breathe through it. One evening, after he left another company event early claiming he had urgent work emails to handle, something inside me broke. I checked his phone messages while he was in the shower. My hands shook as I scrolled. There it was, glowing on the screen like a neon sign screaming the truth I'd been avoiding. A text message from Tessa Green, our company's finance controller. "I miss your touch already. Don't stay too long with her tonight. I need you here." The words felt like knives sliding between my ribs, each one cutting deeper than the last. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside him in our bed, listening to him breathe peacefully while my world crumbled silently. By morning, I'd made my decision. I filed for divorce that very week, my hands steady as I signed the papers, even though my heart was shattering into a million pieces. Evan didn't fight it, didn't beg me to reconsider, didn't even seem surprised when the lawyer delivered the documents. He just looked at me with those cold eyes I no longer recognized and said flatly, "Maybe it's for the best, Keira. We've been growing apart for a while now anyway." If only I'd known then that moment wasn't the end of our marriage. It was actually the beginning of something far worse. It was the start of my complete and total undoing, orchestrated by the man I'd trusted with everything, my heart, my business, my entire future. 3 weeks after I filed those divorce papers, my body betrayed me in ways I never could have imagined. It started innocently enough, fatigue that I blamed on stress, and emotional exhaustion from the separation. Who wouldn't be tired after their marriage collapsed? But then came tremors in my hands that made holding a coffee cup difficult. Then numbness crept into my legs like ice spreading through my veins. Doctors ran endless batteries of tests, sticking me with needles, scanning my brain, checking my blood for every possible condition. Autoimmune flare-up, they finally concluded, their voices clinical and detached. Possibly stress-induced. Your body is essentially attacking itself. We see this sometimes during major life trauma. Within just 1 month, I needed assistance walking. My legs simply wouldn't cooperate anymore, wouldn't hold my weight reliably. I went from running 3 miles every morning to struggling to cross a room without support. It was terrifying watching my body fail me so rapidly and completely. Evan showed up at my apartment every single day during those horrible weeks. He brought fresh flowers that filled my rooms with fragrance. He made homemade chicken soup from his grandmother's recipe. He wore that soft, gentle smile that used to melt my heart back when we first met in college. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Keira," he said one evening, standing in my doorway with an overnight bag. "Not while you're this sick. Let me move back in temporarily. Just until you're better and can take care of yourself again." I wanted to resist. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was wrong, that I should say no, that he'd forfeited his right to take care of me when he'd chosen Tessa. But my heart, still raw and bleeding from his betrayal, desperately wanted to believe he still cared. Maybe this illness had shocked him into remembering what we once meant to each other. Maybe he was finally changing. My best friend Laura practically yelled at me over the phone when I told her, "You're being foolish, Keira. He's only there because he feels guilty. Don't let him manipulate you when you're vulnerable." But as Evan tucked me into bed each night, holding my trembling hand gently until I finally fell asleep, I thought maybe, just maybe, We were healing together. Little did I know the devastating truth. While I was struggling to learn how to walk again, attending painful physical therapy sessions and fighting to regain basic independence, Evan was quietly learning something entirely different. He was learning exactly how to destroy me completely and systematically, piece by piece. At first, his care felt genuinely loving and real. But gradually, small things started to sting in ways I couldn't quite explain. He began handling all my work emails without asking, saying, "You shouldn't stress about business right now, babe. You need to focus entirely on getting better. I'll handle everything at the company." Then one morning, I noticed my work laptop had vanished from my desk where I always kept it. "Oh, I just took it to the office," Evan said casually when I asked, not even looking up from his phone. "The tech team needed your project notes for an important investor report. Nothing to worry about." Weeks passed in a blur of doctor appointments and medication schedules. My name slowly started disappearing from company meetings, from project lists, even from our corporate website. When I mentioned it, Evan would smile reassuringly and say, "Everything's perfectly fine, babe. You're just being paranoid. Focus on healing your body." But one evening, while mindlessly scrolling through my phone during another sleepless night, I saw our company newsletter pop up in my email. The headline made my blood run cold. Tessa Green promoted to acting director of operations. That was my position. My title that I'd worked 10 years to earn. My role managing the work I created. When I confronted Evan about it the next morning, my voice shaking with anger and confusion, he just sighed heavily, like I was being unreasonable. "Keira, someone had to fill the operational gap while you're recovering. The company can't just stop functioning because you're sick. Tessa's doing a good job keeping things running smoothly." That was the exact moment the fragile hope still living inside me cracked again. This time, I knew it was damaged beyond any possible repair. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes anymore, in the casual way he'd stripped away my professional identity. The message that changed everything arrived on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was resting on the couch, half watching a movie, when my phone buzzed with a banking alert. "Urgent alert. Wire transfer completed. $2,800,000. Recipient. TG Holdings." My blood turned to ice in my veins. TG, Tessa Green's initials. Nearly $3 million transferred to her. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "This must be a terrible mistake," I told a customer service representative. But her calm, professional voice on the other end destroyed that hope instantly. "The authorization came from your joint account, Mrs. Winslow. The transfer was signed and approved by both account holders." "Both parties?" "I never signed anything. I never approved any transfer, especially not for that staggering amount of money. My signature had somehow appeared on documents I'd never even seen, never touched." I looked up slowly at Evan, who was standing across the living room with that too calm expression on his face. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what you've done. "Did you move money from our joint account?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was screaming inside. He didn't even blink. Didn't show a single sign of guilt or surprise. "Company expenses, Keira. Standard business operations. I'll explain everything later when you're feeling better." But he never did explain. That later never came, and the explanation remained perpetually just out of reach. That night, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, pale, weak, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed my commands. I looked like a ghost of the strong, capable woman I used to be. But something fundamental inside me shifted in that moment. I realized with absolute clarity that I wasn't just sick with an autoimmune disease. I was being systematically erased from my own life, my own company, my own bank accounts. And from that moment forward, every kind word from Evan, every gentle touch, every act of supposed care became evidence I was carefully collecting. I began pretending to be weaker than I actually was, exaggerating my symptoms. I limped more dramatically than necessary when Evan was watching. I acted confused and foggy when he mentioned business matters, letting him think I was too sick to understand or care. Meanwhile, I turned my voice assistant into a secret recording device. I set it to capture everything, every conversation, every whispered phone call Evan took in the next room thinking I couldn't hear, every meeting he held at our home. Everything was automatically stored in a hidden cloud drive he didn't know existed. Tessa's name appeared constantly in those recordings. "She's handling the operations beautifully," Evan would say over speakerphone to someone, probably an investor or board member. "Keira won't notice any of these changes. She's too focused on her health to pay attention to business details anymore." I smiled in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to these conversations through my hidden recordings. One evening, gathering all my courage, I told Evan sweetly, "I want to come to the next board meeting, just to stay involved and feel connected to the company we built together." He actually laughed, a soft, condescending sound that made my skin crawl. "You really should rest instead, Keira. The board wouldn't understand your condition. You don't want them seeing you like this, do you? It might affect their confidence in the company." Condition. He said it like I was contagious, like I was something shameful that needed to be hidden away from public view. That night, as he slept peacefully beside me in our bed, completely unaware that I was awake, I whispered to myself in the darkness, "You're absolutely right, Evan. They won't understand my condition until they finally see who's really sick here." My physical therapist, a kind woman named Elise who'd been helping me 3 times a week, had noticed things I'd been too blind to see. The small bruises on my arms from accidents where I'd supposedly fallen. The panic in my eyes when Evan deliberately left my medications just out of my reach. The way my body tensed when he entered the room. One afternoon during a session, Elise said very quietly, carefully, "Keira, have you ever noticed a pattern? Your symptoms seem to spike significantly on specific days. The days when Evan personally prepares your meals." She pointed out her notes, showing me the correlation she'd documented over weeks. I laughed it off nervously, not wanting to believe what she was suggesting. But that night, my stomach churned with a terrible suspicion I couldn't shake. When Evan brought me dinner on a tray, his special chicken recipe, I pretended to eat while he watched. Then, when he left the room, I quickly switched our plates. He woke up violently sick the next morning, rushing to the bathroom, groaning in pain. When he called his doctor in a panic, I smiled weakly from my bed, pretending concern. "Maybe it's just a stomach bug going around," I suggested innocently. Maybe it wasn't poison exactly. Maybe it was just karma serving him an appetizer before the main course arrived. 2 weeks later, I intercepted an email on our shared business account, something Evan had forgotten to remove my access from. The subject line made my blood boil. "Finalizing the ownership transfer, urgent." Attached was a detailed legal contract naming Tessa Green as 51% majority shareholder of Winslow Wellness, completely replacing my name and ownership stake. At the bottom, Evan's digital signature glowed on the screen. My heart shattered into even smaller pieces than I thought possible. But what truly froze me, what made me physically sick, wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the CC line on that email. Mark Delaney, legal counsel. Mark was a man I'd once trusted completely, someone who'd been our company lawyer for 8 years. He'd told me repeatedly to focus on getting better and not worry about business matters. Now I understood why. It wasn't concern. It was strategy. He was part of this conspiracy. I sat there staring at my computer screen, understanding flooding through me. It wasn't just Evan and Tessa working against me. There was an entire coordinated pact, a quiet alliance of people I'd trusted working together systematically to strip me of everything I'd built. They all thought I was too broken, too sick, too weak to fight back effectively. They were absolutely right about my body being compromised. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd completely underestimated my mind, which was sharper than it had ever been, fueled by rage and betrayal. I called an old friend, Liam Carter, a cybersecurity analyst whose career I'd helped launch years ago when he was struggling. He owed me, and more importantly, I trusted him completely. He came to my apartment under the innocent pretense of setting up new accessibility software to help with your condition. Instead, we spent 3 hours installing remote access to all my digital files and setting up monitoring systems. Together, we began carefully tracking digital trails, messages between Evan, Tessa, and Mark, money transfers, secret meetings. Everything was being documented now, and they had no idea. Then I asked Liam to help me create something special. A fake investor proposal. One that looked legitimate and contained what appeared to be confidential software code and proprietary algorithms. Intellectual property that would be incredibly valuable to competitors. We sent it to Evan's email with a fake investor's name attached. Within exactly 24 hours, that confidential proposal was forwarded to Tessa's personal email account, sent from her laptop outside our corporate network. They'd just stolen intellectual property from their own company, and I had the complete digital footprint to prove it. I kept up my performance perfectly, like an actress playing the role of her life. Some days, I let Evan think I was fading faster, getting worse instead of better. I'd slur my words slightly. I'd forget simple things deliberately. I'd pretend not to notice when he whispered urgently with Tessa in the hallway, their heads close together. He felt completely safe, totally in control. "Don't worry, babe," he said one night, stroking my hair like I was a child who needed comfort. "Everything's under control now. Once this merger deal finalizes next month, we'll both be free from all this stress." "We." That word hit me like a punch. I smiled faintly up at him, playing my role. "Free from what exactly, Evan?" I asked, my voice small and confused. He kissed my forehead gently, tenderly, like a loving husband. "From all of this mess, all this struggle, you'll see." He had absolutely no idea how close he was to being right about freedom. Just not the kind he was imagining. One morning, my neurologist called with surprising news. "Keira, your most recent test results are, well, they're actually quite surprising and very encouraging. You're improving significantly faster than we expected." I hadn't told her the truth, that I'd stopped taking the medications Evan personally gave me several weeks ago. I'd been secretly disposing of those pills and taking only what my doctors prescribed directly. When I carefully asked what could have caused such a dramatic improvement, she paused thoughtfully. "Sometimes," she finally said, "the absence of a toxin does absolute wonders for the body's natural healing process." That single sentence confirmed everything I'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. That was the exact moment I realized my paralysis wasn't the only thing that was starting to fade away. My fear was disappearing too, being replaced by cold, calculated determination. Evan invited me to a formal dinner with the company's board of directors, his generous gesture of goodwill to include you, he claimed. I arrived in a wheelchair, carefully maintaining my mask of fragility and weakness. Tessa wore my favorite shade of blue that night, a deliberate choice, I was certain. A subtle way of claiming what was mine. As they all toasted new beginnings for Winslow Wellness, I recorded absolutely everything on my phone hidden in my lap. Evan brazenly bragged about upcoming acquisitions he had secured, about innovative strategies he had personally implemented. Every word was a lie, and every lie was being documented. I sat there silent and seemingly invisible, just a sick woman in a wheelchair who didn't matter anymore. Until one board member, an older gentleman named Richard, turned directly to me. "Keira, I've been wondering, did you help design the new software integration system we've been hearing about?" Evan jumped in instantly before I could even open my mouth to respond. "She hasn't been involved in operations lately. Health reasons, you understand. It's been very difficult for her." I lifted my champagne glass slowly, deliberately. "But I actually built that entire code system before I got sick. It's based on my original architecture from 3 years ago." I watched Tessa's perfectly manicured hand freeze completely on her wine glass. A small spark of visible discomfort crossed her face, exactly the reaction I needed to see. Exactly what I wanted. Over the following weeks, I started walking again gradually, slowly, using a cane for support. When Evan saw me standing completely unassisted for the first time, reaching for something on a high shelf, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Something flickered there. Concern? Fear? That's great, Keira, he said, but his voice was tight. Really great progress. That night, I caught him on his phone in the other room, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. She's improving much faster than we expected. Way ahead of schedule. We might need to accelerate our timelines significantly. He didn't know I'd recorded that entire conversation. He didn't know I'd already scheduled a confidential meeting with an external auditor. And he definitely didn't know that every single word he spoke now legally belonged to me as evidence. A week later, I received an unexpected message from someone I never thought would reach out, Julia Tran, Tessa's executive assistant. I think you should see something important, her message read. I can't live with this anymore. Attached were internal company memos proving Tessa had been systematically redirecting company funds to offshore accounts. There were falsified quarterly reports, doctored expense sheets, forged approval signatures. Julia confessed in her message that she'd been directly ordered to falsify financial reports and had been threatened with termination if she refused. I met Julia secretly at a coffee shop across town, making sure no one from the company saw us together. I thanked her sincerely for her courage and promised I would protect her from any retaliation. For the first time in months, I wasn't completely alone in this war. And now, I had someone working inside their walls, feeding me information they never knew was leaking out. I started sending anonymous tips to Evan, fake reports about investor concerns, fabricated warnings from made-up board members. It worked better than I'd hoped. He began snapping at Tessa during their phone calls, questioning her financial decisions, doubting her loyalty. Meanwhile, I leaked carefully selected fragments of truth to board members, always unsigned, always untraceable, but detailed enough to plant serious seeds of doubt about both Evan and Tessa's integrity. Tessa's composure cracked first. I watched from a distance as she started making mistakes, sending emails to wrong people, missing important meetings. Evan's paranoia followed quickly. They started fighting more openly, their voices carrying through office walls. Every single day, they fought a little louder, trusted each other a little less, made more desperate mistakes. They were unraveling beautifully, and I hadn't even revealed my strongest cards yet. I was saving those for exactly the right moment. A courier arrived one morning with a thick manila envelope, official legal documents from Mark Delaney's law firm. Inside were draft papers of a finalized divorce settlement. My name was being systematically removed from all assets, from the company I'd built, even from our home. But here's the thing they didn't know. I'd already filed new ownership restoration papers through my own lawyer 2 weeks earlier, working with corporate attorneys who specialized in exactly this kind of fraud. Those papers legally restored my majority stake in Winslow Wellness. They were fighting desperately over control of a company that was legally and irrevocably already mine again. All I had to do now was wait patiently for them to bury themselves completely under the weight of their own crimes. An anonymous blog suddenly began leaking specific details about Tessa's offshore accounts, account numbers, transfer dates, exact amounts. Headlines followed within days. Winslow Wellness faces major internal financial scandal. Evan immediately blamed Tessa publicly, trying to distance himself. Tessa accused Evan of setting her up, of using her. The board called for an emergency independent audit of all company finances. And I, the ailing ex-wife who supposedly knew nothing, was quietly reinstated to an advisory position to assist with transparency and historical context. It was absolutely poetic, the woman they'd tried to erase becoming their only possible hope for survival. I almost felt sorry for them watching them panic. Almost. But not quite. I had installed one discreet camera in my old home office, just a single small device hidden in a bookshelf. It captured everything I needed. Evan storming in, throwing papers across the room in rage. Tessa screaming at him that she was completely done taking the fall for his plans. Then she admitted it. The words I'd been waiting to hear. You specifically said she'd be gone by now. You promised me the medications would handle it. You said she'd be too sick to fight, that she'd probably die or be permanently disabled. I replayed that confession 3 times, my hands shaking with rage and vindication. My illness hadn't been a terrible coincidence or just bad luck. It was part of their calculated plan from the very beginning. And now, I had the video confession that would end them both. I confronted Evan that night, staying remarkably calm despite the fury burning inside me. "You told me you loved me once," I whispered, looking directly into his eyes. Was it all just an elaborate act? Every moment we shared. He tried desperately to deny everything at first, until I calmly played the video recording. I watched all the color drain completely from his face. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Keira, listen. I can explain all of this," he finally stammered. "It's not what it sounds like. You're taking it out of context." "No, Evan," I said very softly, very clearly. "You really can't explain this away. There's no context that makes attempted murder acceptable." He actually lunged for my phone, trying to grab it and delete the footage. I let him think he'd succeeded, let him believe he'd erased the evidence. But I'd already backed everything up to 3 different cloud services. I'd sent copies to my lawyer. I'd made sure this evidence was absolutely indestructible. And the next morning, every single board member received an anonymous email with a simple subject line: "For your protection and immediate action." When that video surfaced and spread through the company, complete chaos followed. Tessa resigned immediately, her lawyer releasing a statement about seeking treatment for personal issues. Evan was placed on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation. The company's stock price tanked overnight, dropping 30%. But amid all the wreckage and scandal, the truth emerged clearly. Every patent, every trademark, every business license was still registered under my name. They'd failed to complete their theft. They hadn't just failed to destroy me. They'd been building their empire on my foundation the entire time. And now I was taking it all back, piece by piece. The FBI got involved after forensic accountants traced Tessa's offshore accounts. Money laundering, wire fraud, theft of corporate assets. The charges kept mounting. Tessa tried to flee the country, booking a last-minute flight to Mexico. They caught her at the airport, just minutes before boarding. Evan turned himself in 2 days later, hoping desperately for leniency in sentencing. I watched his mugshot flash across every news channel, seeing his defeated expression, feeling nothing. No joy. No satisfaction. No closure. Just a vast, quiet emptiness. He had stolen years of my life, poisoned my body, tried to erase my identity completely. But he hadn't managed to poison my soul or destroy who I fundamentally was. And that realization, I understood, was my real victory. Not revenge. Survival. Winslow Wellness needed serious rebranding and rebuilding. I took the helm as CEO, surrounding myself with new faces, people who were loyal, ethical, genuinely kind. People I'd carefully vetted who shared my values. I donated half my first year's salary to autoimmune disease research, hoping to help others who'd suffered like I had. When reporters asked about my remarkable recovery, I smiled and said simply, "Sometimes, healing truly starts when the poison finally leaves your system." Reporters called my statement poetic. I called it the absolute truth. Months later, I received a letter forwarded from the prison where Evan was serving his sentence. My hands actually shook as I opened it. "Keira," he wrote in handwriting I still recognized, "I never meant for it to go that far. I swear I loved you once upon a time. That was real." I read it once. Then I carefully tore it into small pieces and threw them away without responding. Some apologies aren't meant to heal old wounds. They're designed to reopen them, to make you bleed again. I'd already chosen peace over perpetual anger. And I wasn't giving him another single second of my precious life. People ask me constantly if revenge made me happy in the end. It didn't, not really. But it gave me something more valuable than happiness. It gave me closure, validation, justice. The woman who entered that hospital bed, broken, naive, trusting, died long before the trial ended. The one who walked out of that courtroom learned an irreversible truth. You can rebuild anything in life, except broken trust. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him, my hand searching for his warmth beside me. Old habits die very quietly, fading so slowly you barely notice until they're gone. But then I remember everything. The nurse's concerned words. The sleepless nights recording evidence. The cold smile that hid poison in my food. And I look at my reflection in the mirror, strong, standing tall without assistance, healthy again. The woman who survived Evan deserves the world he tried to steal from her. They say revenge doesn't heal, and maybe that's completely true. But justice? Justice breathes life back into what's been stolen. When I step into my office now, my company, my name restored, my legacy secure, I smile genuinely. Because Evan taught me one crucial lesson I'll never forget, one that's burned into my soul. The most dangerous thing you can ever do is underestimate the woman you tried to destroy. I've started speaking publicly about my experience, giving talks about corporate fraud and domestic abuse disguised as care. Other women reach out to me constantly with their own stories, their own narrow escapes. How did you find the strength? They ask me repeatedly. I tell them the truth. I didn't find it. I built it, piece by piece, from the rubble of what he destroyed. Last week, I opened a foundation, the Phoenix Project, dedicated to helping abuse survivors rebuild their careers and financial independence. The name felt appropriate. Rising from ashes. Transforming pain into purpose. Tessa's former assistant Julia now works for me directly, heading our financial transparency division. She deserves a second chance to do the right thing. Everyone does. I ran into Mark Delaney at a legal conference last month. He looked older, smaller somehow. He tried to apologize, stammering about professional pressures and difficult ethical situations. I looked at him calmly and said, "You made your choice. Now live with it." Then I walked away. I don't waste energy on forgiveness for people who aren't genuinely sorry. I save that energy for building something meaningful instead. My health continues improving steadily. My neurologist says my recovery is remarkable, almost miraculous. I don't tell her about the poison, about the deliberate harm. That's for prosecutors and judges to know. I focus on moving forward, not looking back. Dating feels impossible now. How do you trust someone completely after what I experienced? My therapist says it'll take time, maybe years. I'm okay with that. I'm learning to love my solitude, my independence, my hard-won peace. Besides, I'm too busy rebuilding an empire to worry about romance. Winslow Wellness is thriving again. We've launched 3 new product lines. Our stock price has recovered and then exceeded previous highs. Employees who left during the scandal are returning, apologizing, asking for second chances. I'm selective about who I rehire. Loyalty matters now more than ever. I received an interesting email yesterday. A major business magazine wants to feature my story, the woman who refused to be erased. I'm considering it, not for revenge or publicity, but because other women need to know, you can survive this. You can rebuild. You can win. Your abuser doesn't get to write the ending of your story. I visit my parents more often now. They never knew how bad things got, how close I came to losing everything including my life. I don't tell them the full truth. Some burdens are mine alone to carry. But Mom notices changes in me. You seem stronger, she said last Sunday over dinner. Not just physically, something deeper. I smiled and squeezed her hand. I learned what I'm made of, Mom. Turns out I'm stronger than anyone thought. Sometimes late at night, I still hear Evan's voice on those recordings. The casual way he discussed destroying me. The cold calculation in his plans. It still sends shivers down my spine. But those shivers aren't fear anymore. They're reminders of my own strength, of what I survived, of what I overcame against impossible odds. I'm writing a book about my experience. Not for money, though publishers are offering substantial advances. For healing. For other women who need to know they're not alone. The working title is Built on Poison, How I Reclaimed My Life from the Man Who Tried to Erase Me. It's therapeutic, getting everything out on paper. Organizing the chaos into coherent narrative. My lawyer reviews every chapter carefully. We can't risk lawsuits, even though everything I write is absolutely true and documented. I testified at Evan's sentencing hearing. Stood in that courtroom and looked him in the eye while describing what he did to me. My voice never wavered. The judge gave him 12 years. Tessa got 8. Mark Delaney was disbarred and sentenced to 3 years for his role in the conspiracy. Justice doesn't always happen, but this time it did. I planted a garden at my new house, the one Evan never set foot in, never tainted with his presence. Roses, lavender, herbs. Things that grow and thrive and smell beautiful. Metaphors aren't subtle, but I don't care. I'm literally planting new roots, growing something beautiful from scorched earth. Today marks exactly 2 years since I filed for divorce. 2 years since this nightmare began. I'm celebrating by treating my entire team to lunch at the best restaurant in town. We've earned it. Someone asked me yesterday if I'm glad I went through all this. Glad seems like the wrong word. I wouldn't choose this path again if I could go back and change things. But I'm grateful for who I became in the fire, for the strength I discovered I possessed, for learning exactly what I'm capable of when pushed to the absolute edge. Evan tried to break me. Instead, he forged me into something unbreakable. That's the part he never understood. Diamonds are created under intense pressure. Gold is purified in fire. And women who survive attempted destruction? We become forces of nature. I look at Winslow Wellness now, my company bearing my name, built on my vision, and I feel pride so deep it brings tears to my eyes. Not the company itself, but what it represents. Survival, resilience, justice. The most dangerous thing Evan ever did wasn't trying to poison me or steal my company. It was underestimating my will to survive, my refusal to disappear quietly, my determination to reclaim everything he tried to take. He thought my weakness was permanent. He thought my trust was stupidity. He thought my love made me blind. He was wrong about everything. I'm standing in my office right now, looking out over the city where I built my empire twice, once with him, once despite him. The second time was harder, but infinitely more satisfying. Because this time, it's truly mine. No one can take it away. No one can claim credit. No one can erase my name from what I built with my own hands, my own mind, my own relentless refusal to quit. They tried to write my ending. I wrote a new beginning instead. And that makes all the difference.